welcome our second reader today is Penny Perry. Penny was born and raised in Santa Monica, California, the setting for her first collection of poetry, Santa Monica Disposal and Salvage, Garden Oak Press. It was published in 2012. She was one of the first women admitted to the American Film Institute in its screenwriting program. She received a special grant through the efforts of two-time Academy Award-winning writer George Seaton to produce a film based on her script of Berkeley Christmas, which aired on PBS. Mentored by Marge Piercy and Diane Wankowski, she teaches poetry and creative writing at private workshops in Southern California. She's been widely published as a poet, and reviews of her poetry collections appear online on writing.com and in Poetry International. And I'll say that I found Penny's poetry and sort of a connection through Marge Piercy, and was when I got this book, I just loved it. It just seemed so wonderful. I wanted you all to hear it. Santa Monica Disposal and Salvage. And I think Penny is a true teller of tales, teller of truths, a person who makes us join her in her world and makes us cry and laugh all at the same time. Let's welcome Penny Perry.
Hi, my cup just runneth over. Maria's been a wonderful muse in my life, in my husband's life, who was silent for many years, and thanks to this wonderful, magical person is writing again. We had a wonderful workshop with some great storytelling, and Jericho, your poems are wonderful. They're tough, they're tender, and they're so forgiving and generous and so honest. And I have some dear friends who came to visit here today that I haven't seen in a long time, and I'm just so happy. Poetry is a bridge. So opposite of Jericho, I grew up in a family of adamant atheists, and who were also, my dad was a lapsed Catholic, and my mother was a militant agnostic. And I think it's in poetry. We were talking this morning about how introverts can find their own world, and I think, for me, poetry became my home very early on, and is my home today. And anyway, here I am. And this is called Alto. In my angel cape, I'm all mouth and pudgy knees, singing joy to the world, to the fog-laced Santa Monica trees. I want to assure Mary and Joseph that heaven and nature and all the creatures on the earth, except my parents, an ex-Catholic and an agnostic Jew, celebrate the birth of their child. At home, my mother instructs, tell your teacher you're not to participate. You believe Jesus was a nice man, just not the Son of God. The next day at school, I sing even louder, joy to the world. I want my voice to reach the harbor, the merry-go-round man on the pier. And Mary, I can see her sweet smile. She looks like the Henshey store Mary, a mannequin in a flowing percale sheet in a palm tree hut in the nativity scene at the park. Miss Proudy, our music teacher, puts her fingers to my lips. Stop! Her hair gleams like copper pots. Her breasts and hips make me think of basketballs spilling from the net of her knit dress. You're worse than our foghorn, tone deaf. Move your lips, she says. Make no sound. Baby Jesus flickers behind my tearing eyes. I know every verse, I say. Gail, the soprano, who forgets the words to Jingle Bells, sniggers. Performance night, my mother pins my wings. Jesus is a fairy tale. She pushes me on stage. At the piano, Miss Prouty's head swivels when my alto, "Joy to the world," rings out. I am not singing for me. I sing for voiceless Mary, dressed only in sheets and sandals in the cool December air. Blueberries. My father never had the climb the orange tree Saturday matinees of the arrow childhood he gave me. Only the wild blueberries, thorny, rich with promise, in the fields and alleys of Longview, where he started at the mills when he was 12. No wonder he always wanted blueberry pie, not cake, on his birthday. Berry juice streaking my mother's best china, purple smudges staining the little shepherdess with her wide hat, staff, and full skirt. The shepherdess calling her sheep just out of view behind the willow tree. My father's hands calloused from shoveling clay, dirt, bricks, stones in the hot sun, devil winds and rain. No hat, sun burning danger into his skin. Those thick trowel hands holding mother's delicate gold fork. The two of them, mismatched shepherdess and mill worker. His birthday tongue tasting again, blueberries fed by the creek, or for the taking on a neighbor's fence. And my mother and my grandparents pretended they weren't Jewish, and we lived in a very conservative Protestant town. And first there was World War II, and then there was McCarthy, and both those things influenced them very much. And this one's called Witness for my mother. Inside the Rialto movie theater, the little usher in a maroon uniform lights the aisle for a man carrying popcorn and dripping water from the brim of his hat. After the feature in English, Black Friday, a German newsreel. It is February 1940, rain pouring on the theater's peaked roof and the wide Los Angeles streets. Though her parents whisper about politics in worried Yiddish, the usher doesn't usually watch the news. She's grateful for her job and the camouflage of her married name. On the movie screen, a woman with sloping shoulders and a small suitcase causes the usher to stare. The woman in her winter coat and waiting with the other Jews from Stettin for the night train that will carry them to Poland could be her own Aunt Sil. The usher wonders how it would be, the knock on the door, a few hours to gather her belongings. Quick as the flick of a flashlight switch, the woman from Stettin is gone. The usher rubs gold braid on her uniform, studies army tanks, bombers, and then Tom and Jerry racing across the screen. She is glad she works mostly in the dark. Plump, cheerful Mr. Schneider, the theater owner, never guesses she is a Jew. After her shift, she drives home down palm-lined streets, pooling now, forming creeks and even rivers. The city never believed a rain like this would come. In her apartment, she cries to her husband, downs a shot of whiskey she usually reserves for menstrual cramps. On her old Royal, she types the word Stettin, writes a letter. At midnight, she steps out in the street, imagines German eyes following her from the rain streaked windows of cafes, whose neon signs turn the new LA rivers the color of blood. She drops her envelope in a yawning mailbox. 3 days later, she receives her reply. Thank you for your interesting letter about Stettin. We're unable to print it at this time. She stands on her porch and wonders at her own odd relief. For a moment she is safe, anonymous. rain dropping on rooftops and palm trees and bus benches and her own hatless head. She steps inside to type another letter. My mother was always afraid I might meet my Catholic relatives and turn Catholic. Last afternoon, I'd never met the Hayseeds, the Hicks, my Catholic grandparents. They were Irish and mad at my mother. When I was a baby, she wouldn't let a man in a hat baptize me. My mother told me they were sure I was going to hell. I hid under the bed all that afternoon. 4 new shoes marched toward me, the bigger pair, shiny and black, no hayseed that I could see. Must have been my grandfather's. His voice rumbled, "Where's the girl?" Grandmother's voice furry like a cat's. "Where is she?" I was 7. They were coming to take me to hell. Or limbo. Limbo between heaven and hell was like the stalled escalator at Sears, stuck between the first floor that smelled like popcorn and candy and the basement with pitchforks, lawnmowers, and motor oil. Hell was hotter than Sears, hotter than my cocoon under the bed. I could hear my own breathing. My grandmother's feet, moving closer, were wide like mine. Sweat from my forehead dripped on the hardwood floor. "I can't imagine where she could be," my mother was saying. "I hope she likes the doll we brought," the furry voice now so close. Breeze flapped on the shade. Through the open window I could hear my baptized friends playing tetherball 2 doors down. Fringe from the bedspread brushed my face like flames. And now for the Jewish answer. My grandfather changes his name. At the Grand Canyon Red Rock Motel, he signs the register, the shiny Buick out front. My grandmother's holding the picnic basket, boiled chicken, glances at the paper, the familiar handwriting, the blue ink. "Mr. and Mrs. Taylor? Am I some floozy? You have to write a different name, Taylor?" She tells the clerk, "We're married 40 years. Grandpa says nothing, steps out for the valise, polished shoes, a tuft of thin blonde hair slicked back under the Panama hat. His purple shirt looks like an orchid in the Arizona heat. In the hot hotel room, they sit on twin beds, whir of the fan the only sound. She unpins her long hair. "One of your practical jokes?" My grandfather, the lawyer, says, "Taylor is now our legal name." She sighs, thinking about the engraved flatware, cloth napkins, tea towels, the H she sewed on each percale sheet and pillowcase. "I've been Mrs. Hyatt since I was a girl. What about your brothers and sister? Who goes and changes his own family name?" His jacket and tie on, he sits stiffly. She is already down to her pink corset. "Meshuggah," she mutters. She's never called him a name directly before. Plenty of Blitzkrieg, the dictator, out of his hearing. He opens the paper he bought in Kingman. Senator Joe McCarthy, with his wide forehead and dark eyebrows, glare at him in black and white. She studies her husband as if he were a rare eggshell brocade she has never seen before. The bump on his head, a wound from a rock thrown by a Jew-hating soldier in Russia years ago, shines in the dim motel light. She thinks of the stories she heard. Her husband taught himself English while driving a bus, the book in his lap, eye on the road. How proud he was to follow Teddy Roosevelt up San Juan Hill. How he always stopped to salute the statue of the soldier at the Veterans Cemetery. He loves this country that gave him his freedom. Sweat, which he calls perspiration, dripping down his neck. He sat bent all summer over the McCarthy hearings as if he were sitting Shiva. "Meshuggah," she whispers again. "You think the fat senator is after you?" She frees a chicken leg from its wax paper and hands it to my grandfather, his hat still on his lap. Gourd song. Gourds covered my mother's garden, thin-necked, big-bellied, with leaves the size of hands that crowded Canterbury bells that worked so hard to live under the murderous sun. Interloper, my mother, a New Yorker in love with Wordsworth, hated L.A. She yanked gourds by their fleshy stems. No English poet ever wrote an ode to gourds. Mexicans make things out of them, even musical instruments, said my mother's best friend Dorothy Costello to her abbot, 200 pounds in shorts. My mother stood upright as bamboo, their straw hats knotted like sunflowers. Later, Dorothy painted the gourds Frida Kahlo blue. Mother strung them above the hollyhocks, shaken by wind, seeds sung inside the hollowed fruit. Gourds swayed as Frida's colorful dresses once did against the New York skyline. At night, my father dreamed of his lover, my mother in a peasant dress, bare feet warm by patio stones, sipped tequila under the city moon. Okay, and we're going from light into a little darkness now. Bubble cut. My hair in Peggy's fingers looks like a bouquet of wild wheat. She waves scissors. You sure? I love my long hair. Grandma says it's unruly. Now she whispers, you have to look nice for the funeral. You're a young lady, not a banshee. Peggy smells like the sweet liquid she sprays on my hair. I could cut your hair like mine, a bubble. Bubble light, airy, tame, Sandra D. Maybe Grandma is right. I let Peggy snip, watch my hair meet itself on the shiny floor. She winds my hair in short strands, in copper-colored rollers. Big date? I shake my head. The rollers clink like loose pocket change. Tomorrow, Forest Lawn will swallow my mother. Meek as a shorn Samson, I follow Peggy to the dryer. Hot air burns my scalp. My grandmother, her face freshly powdered, her lips tight, sits with a mademoiselle unopened on her lap. My hair dry, Peggy pulls rollers free. I tug the frothy curls. From the next booth, some low foghorn cry. You've ruined me, a woman weeps. Her sobs become wild, banshee wails. She kicks her chair, streaks past us. The salon cape flaps on her shoulders. Through the open door she shouts, this is the worst day of my life. In the mirror, my grandmother's eyes meet mine. Her face in the coffin. Bangs cut, Franciscan monk short, her lips the fuchsia she loved in flowers but would never paint on her own mouth, her eyes closed, her lashes evenly darkened with not one of her mascara clumps. After the funeral, my father insisted we drive to a different Safeway than the one my mother and I liked. A woman in capris and a low-cut top told him she heard about his wife. The milk carton cold in my hand, I stared and stared. The stranger with black hair, twin ovals of rouge, and fuchsia lips looked like my mother in her mortuary makeup. Years later, when my father tore her phone from the wall and tossed her hairdryer through the window, this woman would tell me the two of them were together before my mother died. That Saturday afternoon, earrings swayed like chimes, her cart ripe with oranges and early cherries. These are the last two poems. Hollyhocks. 3 days after my mother died, her hollyhocks tumbled down under their own weight. My father disappeared. I had eaten the last of her meatloaf wrapped in wax paper. She had waved me out of her kitchen. No need to learn to cook. You'll be a professor. She ground her own meat, the red strings wriggling like worms. Though I only had my learner's permit, I drove her old Plymouth to the store. There were whole aisles in Safeway she never went down. That first day I bought bird's eye frozen broccoli, macaroni, and cheese. The mothers of my friends told their daughters, "Stay away from her. Who knows what's going on in that house? Parties, boys." There were no parties, no boys. Nights I would call time to hear a lady say it is 3:03. I made Jell-O and Swanson's turkey dinners. I asked the gym teacher, perky Miss Butler, a woman whom a month before I would never have talked to, about salads. Miss Butler coached the girls' drill team. She told me she had polio as a child. People could survive all sorts of things. She said, "Wash the lettuce first." I fried hamburger meat, flames jumping wildly under the iron skillet. A month later, my father reappeared, moved us to a dingy apartment across town. Nights I would sit in my mother's car in front of her old house. The new owner, a gardener, staked my mother's hollyhocks. I couldn't see the pale pink, ruby and yellow flowers in the dark, but I knew they were there. This is the last poem, and it's called Salvage. And my father ran a junkyard, and my mother, who had higher education, he'd only finished 8th grade, wanted to make it sound nice and fancy, so she called it Santa Monica Disposal and Salvage. Typical English major. Salvage. I should have trusted his knack for salvage. When I was little, my father opened a junkyard. My mother, an English major, named it Santa Monica Disposal and Salvage. He built his dreams on scrap metal and beat up furniture rich folks didn't want. I'd pretend I didn't know him, the man in the dented pickup who waved to me. He smoothed scratches and nicks, polished brass, washed glass chimneys, fashioned wicks for oil lamps. The summer I was 8, he let me turn the lamp's tiny knobs. Flames flickered in small chimneys, lights shone on my mother's roses, chairs he restored, and in oranges of the trees he saved. After my mother died, he disappeared. We became each other's refuse, eggshell reminders of a former life. Like gulls, those unwelcome picnic guests, we circled each other. Then, one night, his sober knock on my door. I remembered the oranges on trees he saved, 100 salvaged moons, and I let my father in. Thank you very much.
I think it's really important that people begin to understand that there is absolutely nothing wrong with having emotions, that it is indeed human to have emotions. And that sounds trite,
Yeah.
but the truth is that we live in a world where over and over again we're told by our journalism, by what we watch on YouTube, by what is said on social media, by even our interactions with one another in passing, we're told to be numb. You know,
Yeah.
we're asked to be numb to what goes on this planet, in this country. We're asked over in our families, you know, to act as if things that are affecting us are not affecting us, right? And it's almost as if the person who shows any sort of passion is made fun of or treated badly. But poetry is different because it awakens those feelings, it awakens emotions, it makes you aware of the fact that what you are feeling is indeed real and that there's nothing wrong with having those feelings.
Yeah, and one honest feeling in the closet whispered to yourself, and then leads to another honest feeling whispered to yourself, And then one day the closet door opens a little bit and somebody might look at in my case, I really was literally writing in a closet. And my son he went to Berkeley as an English major, and he came home, he says, what are all these scraps of paper, these napkins with words on them? And, and I said, well, they're just things I write down. And he goes, Mom, you're a poet. And I said, oh, don't be silly, I'd had a roommate in college who was a real poet, And so that helped. All you need is like one person to say, oh, yeah, I kind of see that. And then that gives you the courage to go on to the next thing. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
But how I understand, the three of us somewhat understand, I'm beginning to know more and more, but language is powerful.
Language is very powerful, and I met a woman who had a background similar to mine, whose mother died when she was young and her dad was an alcoholic, and we met when we were in our early 30s, and we started to exchange poems by mail even though we lived in the same town. And it felt as if I get an envelope from her, and it felt as if like a bomb was going to go off in the mailbox. And I carried in, and it felt like it was like a stick of dynamite or something. And the same for her. And
Yeah.
it's very powerful.
Yeah. Language is very powerful. Words make things happen. Words really do. They change minds.
They do change minds.
Words cause violence, and words also can be the greatest expressions of love. Right?
Yeah.
They map our feelings, and they map us on to one another in so many ways. So it's so funny though, because they're words. They're not actually, you can't touch them, but they are there. There's something in us. The brain lights up when we hear certain words. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one of my students said today, she asked me, well, can I use a specific name like Agnes, my Aunt Agnes, in a poem? Because people told me not to. And I said, oh, no, you must, because it's your Aunt Agnes and you have feelings, but everybody's had an Aunt so-and-so or an Aunt so-and-so. So words, Maria's always saying that words make the bridge between people. And the more, what's weird, his work is so honest and tender and specific, but what's weird is the more specific you are to yourself, the more universal you end up being.
Yeah.
It's kind of magical.
That's the magic of literature, right? And that's part of what all of literature does, poetry in particular, but all of literature takes history down to the scale of one.
That's right.
Right? All of history suddenly goes down to the scale of one, so that even when we're reading a novel or we're reading a poem or whatever we're reading, we see this experience, and suddenly we begin to understand how the personal is indeed political, or how the private experience stands for the universal experience.
That's right. And if everybody read Red Badge of Courage every year and War and Peace every year, and maybe if we showed the dead bodies coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan, if we could make it personal and specific, maybe we wouldn't have these wars anymore.
In closing, team, because this is a team. We're a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
For that individual or groups of people who are holding all this stuff in, what tools or what could you say to them that they can begin, and maybe not so much to be a poet or to do gigs, but just to kind of get themselves on track? Is there anything that you can say that could just kind of nudge them to say, okay, it's all right to write this. Maybe it's best to write it out versus to go out and get angry and do something crazy in society and then have to pay for it. Is there anything that you guys can say to them folks?
Well, first of all, I think we all start off as poets and we kill poetry in the schools. We were talking about that earlier.
Wow.
So I like to work with kids and just have them write about, say, the weather, and just start with a word or two about their own experience, and that's going to lead to more words. One word leads to another. And I also encourage people to write journals and to say the word I, because the word I ends up being personal and political.
I think that reading, I grew up at a time when there was, now you go in a bookstore and you have to walk to the back of the bookstore to get to the books. First you pass all kinds of clothing. They sell food, they sell coffee, they sell trinkets, they sell sweaters, and then there might be some book, and this is like every college bookstore that you ever go to. The books are sort of somewhere off in the ghetto. And then, even in libraries now, you pass by a floor of computers, or rows and rows of computers before you can actually get books. But I grew up in a time where, when you went to the library and there was nothing there but books. You went to the bookstore and, oh my God, books.
Right.
And I think it's true though that books do something for us that, though I love Scandal on Thursday night, though I love, I do, I love it. Though I love, the occasional reality TV show or the occasional talk show, though I love movies and film, right? Absolutely. And I think of film as another art form of high art. But reading does something for us that no other art can do. Reading asks us to create in our head those people, those characters, right? And so that they're not only the poets, not only the writers, but they also become ours, right? I remember the first time I read, there's a novel by Alice Walker called The Third Life of Grange Copeland. And I remember it became very evident, I don't know why, but it became very evident to me that the people, I read it in this class that I was taking as an undergrad, and I realized that the people I had been envisioning in my head were people from my family. And I looked around, for each character I had to sort of assign them a face. And I looked around the room where I was learning this text, and I realized, oh my God, when I see a character from this book, I don't see the same person that these other people see. And we were all becoming acquainted with the same characters. That's right. But reading asks you to be interactive. You don't just lay back and get entertained, right? It asks you to become a part of this work that's being done during the writing of the text. And so I think the best thing anybody can do is to search out the books that will make a difference to their lives, that will change them. There is a book for every life on this planet.
That's right.
There is a book for every life on this planet. And I think that it is important that we keep looking for that book or those books that make a difference to our lives. And let me say this last thing, just in case, anybody, because people are afraid of that. People are really afraid of reading. And it is, they're just scared. That's a really good point. They're scared. And that's part of the reason. I have some
in-laws who are very scared of some books.
Part of the reason they're afraid, well, part of the reason they're afraid for a few reasons. One is, like I said earlier, everything about the world tells us to be numb.
That's right.
And they understand, sort of intuitively, inherently, they know, oh my God, I have to read and then I'm going to have to experience things that I have not in any way been prepared to experience. I don't want my emotions. So that's number one. Then number two, they understand intuitively that, and inherently, they understand reading is interactive. Nobody wants to interact. We all just want to lay around. we all want to be told what to do, right?
Wow. And reading gives permission.
Yeah.
Because, my oldest son is gay, and so my daughter-in-law and my straight son are very afraid, oh my God, what if our son is gay? And so there are certain books that I wanted them to read, my grandson to read. He's very smart.
oh no, because that might give them permission. Even though I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking about something else entirely, but there was like one gay character that walks in a room for 3 seconds. God forbid. You know.
So am I hearing this that that there are people walking amongst us
that are terrified of books.
of reading?
Of reading.
Well, but they've
there
also
always have been. But of the Salem
But
trials.
isn't
Yeah.
but this is 2014.
But I think a lot of people are intimidated by books because, as
Really?
you said, a lot of things happen to us in school where like reading is beaten out of us in one way or another by words or by literal, sometimes by ruler across the knuckles, right? For some of us, right? Like, I think that a lot of people are intimidated by reading. But if we think about art, if we think about literature the same way we think about any other piece of art, for instance, when we're in the car, if we turn on the radio, song after song comes on, and we don't hear them, or we're thinking, oh, whatever. But then there's one song, maybe out of 7.
That's a green light for something.
Yeah, a song will come on, and we're like, oh yeah, that's my jam.
Right.
And we turn the stereo up.
That's
And we
right.
do a little jig in our car. And reading is the same way. A book of poetry is the same way. It's up to us in the same way that when we're in our car and we allow ourselves to fall prey to the music and the vitality of the song, right? It's up to us to put ourselves in the position where we can fall prey to the music and the vitality of poetry.
That's right.